Hey guys, welcome back to the show. I'm really excited today for my guest, Jake Roberts. Jake is my friend, and we've been acquainted with each other's work, specifically related to Oak Island. You guys know I've done a lot of work with Oak Island. In 2017, I presented in the War Room, and actually turns out that Jake did as well. I believe it was a different year, but we'll have him tell you about that in a few minutes here. And yeah, we've been familiar with each other's work on online, in various groups, Facebook groups, YouTube shows, stuff like that. And then we finally actually met late last year, when I sent Jake a message and I actually asked if I could be on his podcast. And his podcast is called Ghosts of Bacon on Facebook and YouTube as well. And
That's right.
the reason I wanted to join him is that I saw a video. He was on Jeff Freeman's podcast, which I'll get to in the bio in a second, so we can list all the wonderful things that Jake has done and continues to do. But
Thanks,
basically,
man.
oh, you're welcome. So I saw him on Jeff Freeman's podcast, and it was a video that came out actually in July of 2022. And if you guys remember, if you've been following my channel, I was on the road at that point doing research. And so I had actually no idea what was going on with anything except what time do I have to wake up and do I have enough time to get to the next site to do research, before the sun goes down. That's all I was paying attention to. So then when the Curse of Oak Island started this year, which is, of course, the TV show on the History Channel, hit TV show, season 10, believe it or not, for people who've been following that. It's hard to believe, but the thing is I said I should probably see what's going on in the Facebook groups. Let me try to catch up on things, and then I don't know. Still don't even remember how, Jake, but I found your video.
Yep.
Jake presented ciphers from the 1611 King James Bible, and specifically related to Francis Bacon and a few other people. And there turned out to be a map in there, and I'd never even seen that map before. And I'm looking at it, and I'm noticing things, and I'm watching Jake, listening to Jake. Of course, I'm a scientist, so I make sure things cross-check. I'm not going to just take his word for it, although I do actually trust him. That's beside the point. But for good science, you really need to look at it critically and objectively. And
For
so I
sure.
did that through the
Absolutely.
presentation. And then afterwards, I just basically decided to send Jake a message because Jake already knows he's got that correct. I don't think he would have come public if he didn't. And he has amazing training, many years of training with ciphers and the such. So I said, Jake, you know what? I'm actually going to come out in support of you. And I wasn't ready to do that until I saw the whole video and I thought about it. And I'm like, no, because it turned out that there were direct correlations between the work I've done with the island and my maps, things that I'm sure Jake has not seen before because it's so obscure. And it has to do with my specific training. These are things that I've been training in for the past 15 years or more.
Right.
So in any case, yeah, I'm really excited to have Jake here today. And I told you guys about how we met through Oak Island, contacts and everything. And how I've done work on the island as well as Jake's done work on the island in the War Room, which is where things are presented, theories and ideas are presented to the team. And then I did join Jake on a show called Ghost of Bacon, and you guys can see that on his channel a few weeks back. It's not hard to find. Just go to the playlist there for the live show.
Yeah.
Okay, so what I'm gonna
And right to this day, Dave, that was, it's still climbing the numbers of views on that video with your interview. You did
oh,
such a
good,
great
okay.
job of explaining your material, like obviously like you always do here on your show. And I just want to say thanks for having me. I'm excited to be here too. So
Oh,
appreciate your trust very much.
Oh man, absolutely. I feel this is the beginning of some really great things in terms of us getting to know each other and being able to share ideas, work together with things.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
I was saying to Jake before the show, guys, I just want these things to be discovered and found. And anyone who knows me, who's listened to what I say, it's all about humanity. You do things for the right reason, and you're not taking money for it or being corrupted or manipulated in any way. And those are the people that I feel that the universe can trust with the information. It's not going to give it to people who are going to spoil it, or throw it in the trash can, or belittle it or condescend it or anything like that. We both, me and Jake, have a long training in our fields, and
Yeah.
it's something that I feel honored to be a part of. And we're going to continue developing. This is a couple people, including Ryan Plaster, that Jake had on a show the other week, who did an absolute powerhouse presentation.
That was, and the best part of Ryan's presentation on my show and participation in it was he and I had been talking for quite a while before I was actually able to finally have him on. And just like I'm a very scientifically minded person where I want to make sure I connect all the dots for people when I do things. As you're going to see, I have hopefully it's not too big of an egghead presentation for people, but it's one of those things where he came to me with this incredible information, and your first reaction is like, okay, that sounds very interesting, and
yeah.
but once I talked to him on the phone, this is such a genuine soul. There's not a I don't feel like there's a deceptive bone in his body, and so he truly believes that he has found the Ark of the Covenant in Arkansas, and I have to say, I hadn't seen. He had shown me a lot of his information, but even though we both do cipher work in a sense, we come at it from different angles, and so I wasn't. I on certain images, I knew exactly what he was doing. And I said, "Oh, okay, I see what you did there. Yes, this is really good work." And the other pieces he sent me, I didn't really understand it. And then he comes on the show and he starts walking me through it and explaining it to me. And he did such an excellent. There were moments I know the people watching the show. I received a lot of comments after that interview, where people would just say, "I could tell by the look on your face that he blew your mind." And he did. Time after time. It just there were times when I was very skeptical. I'm like, "Well, wait a minute, what about this?" And then all of a sudden he would drop another bombshell, and I'd shut my mouth and just say, oh, "Keep going, man. Just keep going." So yeah, if anybody gets a chance to watch that one, and I'm sure at some point, Dave, you'll have him on this show as well. And the more you get to know him, the more you're going to recognize it. Like you already told me you did, before the show started. What a genuine article he is and a good guy.
Oh yeah, and he's never wavered in his conviction, and it's interesting because go ahead, Jake. What were you gonna say about that?
Yeah, I was just gonna say that because he comes at it from a very Christian lens. Okay, he's very well versed in the Bible and the Scripture, and he's a devout believer. I'm coming at it from a completely different angle from the science of cryptanalysis, and yet our information overlaps in such a way that I was completely blown away by his presentation. Same thing with the way you do things, your background and how long you've been studying the Eastern traditions in particular. It's something I'm not that versed in. I know this symbolism and those kinds of things. I can read that pretty well, but nothing to the extent that you can. And once again, we might look at the world just a little bit differently, but at the end of the day, we have repeatability of the information, and our information is all overlapping. And the thing that really really resounds with me is the way Ryan is so unafraid of just putting it out there, putting his information out there because he knows it's true. You do the same thing, and having the experience that I've had, and it's now happening even more so, starting to catch some flack about the things that I know to be true because I've read it, from Sir Francis Bacon himself. And I know these things to be true, and I have the courage of my convictions. And you said it before the show started, if I didn't believe that I had it right, I wouldn't be going public with it. And today there are pieces of the presentation that I still have to play close to my vest, unfortunately. And so anyone who's watching this, don't think I'm just trying to play cute with the numbers or anything like that. I have proprietary information that hasn't been published yet. And so I'm not going to be making the claims that appear in some of the information I'll be presenting this evening publicly yet, simply because I haven't already put the information out there that vets it. However, I do know that particularly when it comes to cipher signatures and numbers, and I'll get into a little bit of what that really means. Unfortunately, understanding my presentation is going to require effort and work, but I have a feeling, Dave, that if any of your viewers are watching you, they're workers, and I'm sure, and thinkers. So I'm sure that they're more than willing to kind of put forward a little bit of effort and pay attention to how all of this stuff works.
Oh yeah, and the nice thing about, of course, a YouTube recording is you can just pause it if you need to go out and do some corollary research or something, or if you need to take a
Right.
break or whatever. Just write down where
Yeah,
you were. You can always come back to it.
exactly. Exactly.
The cipher stuff, um, it can get very in depth. Obviously, I mean, Jake is a
Well,
master at that. He knows about that.
yeah, and that's the problem. Is like when I first started, I wasn't a master at anything.
Yeah, right, right.
There was a very steep learning curve here, but what it turned out to be is a language. And once I immersed myself into it over the last, 5 or 6 years, I'm now fluent in it. And I see, and you, you and I were talking before the show of how when you look at something in your field, you just see it immediately. And so that's the way it is for me with the nature of these ciphers, the symbols, and the numbers as they appear. When I see it, I know what I'm looking at. And if I don't know what I'm looking at, because of the context, I know there has to be something there. And the solution always fits within the context of what I'm looking at. And so,
Right. Yep.
that's one of the things that people really misunderstand about the way these cipher systems work because of how they've been used in the past versus what I started doing with them here very recently, a couple of years ago, when I
Hmm.
decrypted the plaque on Shakespeare's funerary monument in Holy Trinity Church in Stratford upon Avon. Um, when I looked at it, I immediately knew what I was looking at and what kind of cipher it was. It's called a transposition cipher. The characters on that plaque had to be rearranged using an algorithm uh, where there had to be a key to set up the algorithm somewhere there on the surface of the plaque. I looked at it. I was able to identify the keys actually fairly quickly, which really surprised me because I was thinking, there's no way it's this easy. And once I did that first permutation and rearranged the letters, I could see the messages right there appearing in front of me. And I was blown away that it actually worked. And this
What
also convinced me that I am not the first person to ever have done this. Somebody else has done this many times before me, and they know the same information I know. They just haven't shared it with anyone.
I
And
think there's
I
some.
think for a variety of reasons for that as well.
Oh yeah, and I think there's I always say this is like I love any good information I'm interested in. I'm first
Yeah.
in line for it, and I truly mean that. I'm
Yeah.
a very rare person. I think Jake probably is too. That
Yeah.
I literally am interested in everything, and I will close my mouth for 2 hours and listen to someone talk about oil changes in cars and stuff like that, and which weight of oil to use and the temperatures and stuff like that, when to use it. And I'm not kidding. I love it, and that's how you get to a point where you can, if you're objective enough, you're pulling in information from all sides, and then suddenly it's like, oh, you know what? If I didn't give that a chance, I never would have been able to see the full picture. And what I'm really
Bingo.
appreciative for you, Jake, and a few other people as well in the field, is that I've actually never, believe it or not, I've never spent time with ciphers.
Yeah.
Apart from when I was a kid and we had like an activity book or something like that, and it was like an
Right.
easy puzzle. Right. So
Sure.
it's amazing because I don't have to do that as long as I find the right people who can do that. And it's this
Exactly.
exchange. It's this exchange of information. One of the things that's great in terms of how I present things is that I tell people all the time, I'm like, you know what? If you want to understand astrology, don't worry about it. You don't have to do it. You don't have to do all the. Just talk with me. Let's just have a conversation. And
Right.
people who know
Right.
me, they know that I make it very clear, very, very clear, man. A very clear language. I don't use big words. I pause until I know they understand it. We won't move on until they get it. And then eventually you get them to the spot. And so it's a wonderful thing because I feel that if you find the right people with the specific field you're looking for, and you build a strong team, you're going to be fine. And that's what I feel we actually have now, and it's amazing because I feel like it's all coming together, Jake. The right people are coming together.
Well, our friend John Edwards, keeps repeating. He said it ever since I met him. He says, "Jake, it's going to take a village." He loves that terminology and that phrase, um,
Mm-hmm.
and he's right because this is one of the things that Rick Lagina wanted us to do back when I met him with Chris Dona during our first War Room presentation. He really wanted all of the Oak Island theorists and researchers to collaborate. And Erin Helton had described it as, she says, well, we're all in our own little silos here, and we guard our information, and and we want to be the first ones to come out with it. and all of the, her description was actually, pretty accurate. But, having had the experience I've had now, I understand why most people do it that way. But, she and Rick were right in the sense that, Rick was expressing that same sentiment that John, does. It's going to take a bunch of us putting our heads together and figuring out this puzzle. And, that was really his desire early on. And for a while, we had a little bit of a think tank going on with myself and Chris Dona, Chris Morford, Corian, Aaron, and a couple of others. And unfortunately, it has to do with the idea of people coming up with theories versus, just following the clues where they lead. And that's what I do. I've just been following the clues where they lead me. And, at this point, my work has led me away from Oak Island, and I'm fine with that. But at the end of the day, I presented to Rick, Marty, and the team what my research showed me and what it says is going on there. And so since then, I haven't gone back and refined any theory or come up with a new twist on it or anything like that. Like you often see people recycling things because, I get it. If you have a theory, it's an evolution. But the messages I found were, I uncovered them and there they were. And I said, this is what it says. And so do with it what you will. And unfortunately, and if anyone watching this, if you have a desire to be an Oak Island researcher, it's a very easy thing to do. Or if you have a theory, to submit it to their portal on Oak Island Tours. You can contact them through that website. It's a pretty easy process, and it may take a while. It might take quite a long time for them to get to you, or even to get back to you if they think that you have a valid theory. But they will. They do look at everything you send to them. Okay, so I want to be clear about that. But at the end of the day, I used Google Earth to put an X on the map for them. They drilled the site and hit bedrock, which is kind of what I expected would happen, because I think that the chamber that I described is in the bedrock, under the bedrock. But since they didn't hit it, they said, well, sorry, it was a miss. If you have any more information, please reach out, that kind of thing. I said, well, I gave you the site. I said, it's within, 45 feet radius of the point I gave you, because Google Earth, is off by up to 5 meters or 3 meters or so, 5 meters in any direction. So there could be a quadrant there that if they were to search it, they might find an actual, what I call the keystone, hidden keystone. But at the end of the day, it's like, they only have a certain amount of time. And if they don't find something of some significance, they think, oh, well, it was a great theory, but we don't have anything. And I get it, but I'm not going to go back and rework something that I know that I got it right.
Yeah, right.
So there's no need to reinvent it, I don't think.
Right. I think, and I'm not trying to be condescending to anyone, but I think we have a different kind of training, Jake. And I'm not scared about any topic. I'll talk about literally the hardest topics, believe me, and I'm going to be okay. I'm going to be okay, because I can remove emotion from information, which is, again, it's not a common thing, man.
It isn't. I do. And, it's one of the things I try to teach my students, is the idea of how to look beyond their own cognitive biases. And that's the problem we're running into with a lot of research that's coming out. And unfortunately, I do want to tell people that what we see on TV is it's a television show. It's for the purposes of entertainment, and whether or not there's any kind of loyalty to individuals who have presented or anything of that sort. There certainly is on the part of the Fellowship of the Dig. When it comes to the TV show, at the end of the day, it's a TV show, and they're going to want information that they know is going to show well and do well in the ratings. So you have those two different things. We have to separate those within our minds. If you really want to get into doing that for the show.
Yeah, definitely.
And don't take it personally,
And I agree with that. I've had a similar experience, as Jake. And my information was filmed for 9 hours in 2017. They cleared the schedule to do that, and then I didn't get any time on TV. I didn't
Yeah.
get even 5 seconds. There was something that was aired that they actually never followed up on, which was it was something that I said go look over here, go do that or whatever, and they did it, and they showed a
Yeah.
5-second clip of that, and then actually people were saying in the comments on Facebook and stuff, like, hey, what was that clip about? Like, we never saw that. And I'm like, yeah, okay, guys, well, that was because of me, I'm just
Yeah.
saying
Yeah.
that's because it's a fact.
Yeah.
And like Jake said, it is Hollywood, and the other problem is that see, I believe in timelines, and I think we've talked about this, Jake. Of course, being an astrologer, I'm looking every year at, really sometimes on a daily basis if I have to, or if I'm being asked to, about the trends in the sky and what's going on, and matching them up with important dates in history, trying to formulate patterns and things. And so I actually believe, especially after 2017 when I did all my work there, I believe that it's something that has to happen at the right time. And when that message was communicated to me from say the universe, we'll keep it really general, really basic. I finally was at peace with the work that I did and saying, you know what, okay, I get it. And I had a couple when I was on the island. There were a couple messages that came through from the invisible sphere. Let's say, there's things outside the physical realm. Basically, were gently saying to me, um, just we know what to do, Dave, but just relax for a little bit because it's not time for the world yet. It's not you. It's not even Hollywood or not even the team of Oak
Sure.
Island team. The fact that whatever's in there is not something that can come to the surface right now because the world is not quite adjusted for that. And I'm okay with that. But me and Jake been talking about a lot. I say it every time I talk to Jake. I'm like, whatever is the first one, let's get this on the road. Let's get this going, and let's take the first thing out, and I'll be happy. I don't care where it is. We have a big country.
Right.
I'm over. Actually, we're about as far away from each other in the United States as possible right now, Jake.
Yeah, we are. I was going to say that. Yeah.
I was going to say really fast. I've got friends all across the country, and I'm familiar with every state. I've been to all 50 states, most of Canada, so I know where the hot spots are. I know where to look and what I'm expecting when I get into an area. And whoever's going to do it, whoever's going to break it first, I actually think it might be Ryan, to be quite honest with you, Jake. And what's
I know.
What's nice about that is that it's, not a lot of people seem to be paying attention to him. I don't, and I think even he's trying to figure out why that is. He's like, first thing, I think one of the first things he said when he came on your show was, I'm just trying to get someone to pay attention to me.
Yeah.
Why are you guys not? Oh, and here's what I was going to mention fast too, Jake, is that I've read the Bible 3 times. I'm sure you've read it at least parts, probably lots of it.
Oh, yeah.
But I've read it 3 times, front to back, starting at the first page, going all the way to the back. That's not a lie. It's not an exaggeration. That's true.
Same
and,
here.
Yeah, right. I knew it without even really asking you point blank there. But the thing
we're readers. We're readers, Dave. We're a rare breed these days.
It is. But
I say that as an English teacher.
Right. Exactly. But it's something too that you have to kind of know what you're looking for as well. So the first time I read it, I didn't even really know. I wasn't even comfortable with it. The second time I was picking up some things. By the third time, I was sewing in all the esoteric concepts and trying to interpret it at many levels, which they all have different levels of meaning as you read through the Bible. It is astrotheological as well.
Oh, yeah.
Which meaning it has to do with the stars and planets and metaphors using, for instance, when it says Jupiter, that's Jupiter. It's an easy one, but it doesn't necessarily mean he wasn't a real person, because the universe works on multiple dimensions at the same time. And I had a hard time with this, Jake, when I was first getting into this stuff, is that I wanted to pick one item and say, oh, this is it right here. And then I realized, wait a minute, no, I mean, it is, but it's also this.
It's also
and
this.
Wait a minute. Right. And wait a minute. It's also these other 8 things at the same time.
Exactly.
And if people are not ready for that, man, it can really throw you off. I just want. Oh, sorry, Jake. Good.
No. Finish your thought. I'm sorry, I interrupted.
Well, I just want to say one more part about this is that this summer I did a very long trip. I was on the road for 100 days. I don't know if I told you that, Jake, but I was camping, doing research. I woke up somewhere different almost every day. It was obviously exhilarating, really cool, but it's also not glamorous. I'm not going to pretend like it was. You got to make some sacrifices, but it's just amazing to be able to do that. and you wake up in the middle of the night and the stars are all out, and you just step out of your tent or wherever you're sleeping, and you can just look up and there's no one around. Air is clean. It's just phenomenal. So anyway, a big part of my research was actually following the Mormon trail, and the Mormon story. They're
Cool.
current. I don't know if we talked about that yet, Jake. I guess we
No,
probably have.
I didn't know you did that. That's really cool.
I did, and so what I did, what I would say is that, and stand very firm in my conviction on this. I stand very firm in my conviction, really, on everything I talk about. I don't say it unless there's a reason. But Joseph Smith, who founded the Mormon Church, there's actually several different denominations now, but
Right.
generally, the largest is called LDS, which is Latter-day Saints. And I thought that was the only one, and it's not. There's actually
Right.
there's actually three primary ones. And then there's a lot of ones, satellite ones off of that. And so when you're talking with people in the LDS church, you're getting their side of the story. And that's only if they know the text really well and they know about Joseph's revelations and all these things. But there's also the other churches. And if you go into the other churches and ask them why the other church is wrong, this is, wow, that was interesting. The fly went right across the screen.
Yeah,
That was. Oh, that was big too.
Yeah, but he was really tiny. He looked huge on the screen. He's a tiny little fly just crawling across my. That's hilarious.
Yeah, that's amazing. I mean, that might have been Joseph Smith, with all due respect. I'm close with him in the spirit realm, Jake. So basically, he was born in Vermont, and I was born in Connecticut. And it turns out we were born in the same line of longitude, which is very peculiar.
That's interesting.
And when you're talking about ley lines and things, they are real, and they may not be called ley lines always. That's a fairly new term, but in terms of energy lines on the grid of the earth, absolutely. And I always include that in when I'm going to a site and doing like an exposition on it. So anyway, what happened was ever since 2011, I have not been able to get that story to disappear in my life. Joseph Smith's story and the revelation, all that. And I tried too. I mean, I wasn't deliberately sweeping it aside, but I'm busy with other stuff. So it wasn't my number one topic. But what ended up happening was when I was in Alaska in 2011, I actually got the Book of Mormon because I drove by their temple and I saw the golden statue at the top, which his name is Moroni. He's an angel. And I didn't know who he was. And so I actually called the church, Jake, I mean, both of us, we're not afraid of calling people we don't know, talking to people, being like, hey, I'm interested in this, and whatever. And exactly, in a way that's not threatening to them and, makes everyone feel comfortable. So I asked them who it was. They told me. And then I actually asked if I could have a Book of Mormon. They gave it to me, at no charge, which is key to religion also, is that you never, ever charge for your religious text. If someone's doing that, man, there's something really wrong. Yep. You want people to read it. You want to give it open arms to people. You're not going to, if they're charging, there's something off there. So I read through it. Long winter in Alaska, got down to negative. Well, you've probably seen negative 15 too. Where you
easily.
are, that's probably not.
Yeah.
Yeah. But for me, Jake, I'd never seen that before, so that was extreme. And the thing about it is that I read it, the whole thing, front to back, and I set it aside. I said, "Wow, that was very interesting," and it's really cool because it's kind of like America's supernatural story, and a lot of people don't know about it. But
that's true.
Yeah, and it's based here, and there's a lot of sites very close to where you live too, Jake. I mean, you're actually like right between them, two of the big sites. So the thing about it is that it would never go away. I always had missionaries coming to my door, and they will teach you about the gospel and ask if you'd like to join the church and all these things. And they're very, the big picture is that most of them are very nice, generous, kind people. Actually, if you give them the time.
They are very much so. Yes.
Exactly. And I have a lot of LDS friends specifically, and I really cherish them. They're some really great people. They're very, very talented people as well in all the fields that they do. So what happened was it just would never go away. The story wouldn't go away. I had missionaries coming in my door once every couple of years. And every time I would say, yeah, actually, guys, I'm a big supporter, or at least at the beginning, I was a big fan of the story. It's a great read. If you think it's like yeah, and if you think it's fiction, fine. But it's actually extraordinary. It's an extraordinary story, and if it is fiction, it's one of the best fiction stories, in my opinion, that's ever been written. I
Yeah.
actually don't believe it's fiction at all. But the thing is I wasn't ready to state that until I had, guess what? Read the Book of Mormon. Then this past last year, I read Doctrine and Covenants, which is the book of Revelations to Joseph Smith, amongst other things. And then the Pearl of Great Price, which is another. The three, those are the three primary LDS texts. So I had my friend. He said, "Dave, I really think you should read Doctrine and Covenants." And I said, "I agree, man. I just don't have time." And I really wanted to, but I didn't. I had a list of like 15 books ahead of that. I didn't have time for that. And I know you know how that is.
I do.
Yeah, right.
I do.
All right. So anyway, what ended up happening was I finally read it, and it was just before I started my trip last summer. And I determined, based on after reading that, I said I have to go to these sites. I want to go to these places where Joseph had these revelations. And I was planning a trip back to New England anyway. I was living in Texas at the time. Went back to New England to see my friends and family. And then I actually started at the beginning, the very beginning of this story. And actually, before I got to Joseph's birthplace, which is in Sharon, Vermont, it's about halfway up Vermont, central Vermont, I went to Brigham Young's birthplace because it was right in the way. And if Brigham Young was the second president of the church, and Joseph, of course, was the first. So I went to all those sites, and then I went west through New York, upstate New York, of course, and then I came out through around Rochester, there's a town called Palmyra, where Joseph had his first vision. He got
Very
the
familiar
plates.
with it.
All right. So have you been there, Jake?
Oh, yeah.
Palmyra?
Yes.
Okay. So, and then he got the plates from Hill Cumorah from the Angel Moroni there after 4 years of waiting and talking with him and making sure he was ready, basically. And then the Saints, they call themselves the Saints. The Saints, they moved west through Ohio and then into Missouri. They were kicked out of Missouri. They were forced into Illinois. And then Joseph was martyred. He was actually murdered and while he was at jail. It's a very, very sad story. I've been to that jail. I've been in the room that it happened. I've been outside the building where it happened. And I'll actually share this really quickly. Well, before I share, let me say one thing. I'll wrap up this topic because we got a lot more to talk about, Jake. You and me will talk about this off the air for sure, and maybe we can do a show on it sometime.
Without a doubt.
Yeah, so I've kept following the trail. Obviously, after Joseph was killed, the Saints moved west, and they went through Iowa. The swamps of Iowa took them so long to get to Council Bluffs, and which is essentially right around Omaha, Nebraska, current day Omaha. And when you're crossing the river there, just when you're getting into Nebraska. And that's where they had winter quarters, where they were kind of waiting for the winter to pass. And then they started to head to Salt Lake. And then, that's why they're in Salt Lake now, is because that was the revelation, was to go to Salt Lake. Well, I just want to share one thing. So I did that whole trail. It took me a very long time. It was one of the most fulfilling things I've ever done in my life. And, I get revelation all the time when I'm on the trail doing research in terms of, I have a silent moment and I ask, what should I believe here? Please show me something. I don't know what's going on. I'm a very open person. I'm very objective. Whatever it is, I say it to the universe all the time. I'm not going to be offended. I'm also not going to be freaked out because I've had huge quantities of paranormal things happen to me. They happen to me every day, actually. But I've seen aliens, I've seen craft, I've seen ghosts, I've seen demons. I mean, all this stuff, man. So I'm not scared of that stuff. So if that's what's there, okay, just show me. And then, if I don't like it, I'll be like, all right, man, I respect you, but I'm not going to be around this kind of energy, and I'll leave. So whatever it is, I want to know. But what happened is when I was in Carthage, which is where Joseph was killed, actually, we had a tour. And then what ended up happening was after the tour, everyone the visitor center closes. I think it closed at 5 p.m. local time. So everyone kind of went home, and there's a little courtyard area you can walk around and sit in, and there's nice texts, quotes from Joseph and a few other people who were part of the church. And I was reading that, and I actually went back to take a picture, and I took a picture, and the sun actually was just over the top of the roof. And this is one in probably a billion chances this could have possibly happened. It had to be the right time of the year, and it had to be the right time of day, and it had to be a clear day. All of these things that would have had to happen to make this happen. What happened is the ray of sunlight, and I saw this after I actually did not see it while I was taking the picture. I was actually just trying to get it in frame so I could get a clear picture. Because of course, when you have sun, it can put glare on the picture and all this stuff makes it difficult. So I look back at my picture, and there was actually a beam of light coming sun was, it looked like it was sitting right on the line of the rooftop, exactly like parallel with the rooftop. And then
Hmm.
there was a ray of light coming down. It went through the top story window that Joseph actually jumped out of when he was shot. He was shot many times actually, and he was even shot after he was dead. It was a horrific thing. But he jumped through the top window, and then he landed on the stone beneath that. And there's actually, I mean, it's highly symbolic. It's amazing. There's actually a well right there. There's a well. I don't think it's still operational, but they have a cover on it. But there's a well right next to it. And so the beam of sun went from the top of the roof, the rafter, straight through that second story window where he jumped from, and straight to the well. And it actually terminated at the well. So you've got, in terms
Wow.
of symbology, you've got fire in the sky, you've got water on the ground, and that was essentially the path that he, without being too descriptive, that's how he fell out of the second story window. And he was dragged against the well and shot 4 times after he was dead. And
Wow.
that's where he was left, for a little bit, is I guess propped up against the well. So I'm seeing the exact story. It's actually showing me in the sky, and it's showing me what happened. And then, I mean, if that wasn't enough, I went around the building, and I have an EMF detector, Jake. So every time I go in, I do take energy readings. It's a very important part of figuring out. It's a great tool to have because it can support your biofeedback and what your body's telling you. And if it's telling you the same thing, it's pretty good data. So I
Right.
walked around the building, and when I came to that bottom window, actually, which is where he would have landed on the ground, I came to the bottom window, and it was spiking quite a lot. Usually it rests in the green. Was I believe the RF spectrum I was using at the time. I found that RF radio frequency picks up spirits a lot. It's either there or magnetism. It's one of the two that I found that really picks it up.
That's interesting.
So oh yeah, it was spiking a lot, and I actually, before it started spiking, or before I even turned it on, I felt a presence there. I actually looked through the window because I thought there was someone inside, and that's not common for me, guys. Believe me, I don't. That doesn't happen to me a lot. And then I was standing there, and then I actually had turned around, and I felt someone behind me, and it was a tall man, about 6'2", 6'3", which was his height. That was actually his height. He was broader than I am. I used to be more of an athlete, but he's a broad guy, very built, very strong. That's in his descriptions. When you read through the text and everything. And I knew it was him. I absolutely knew it was him. And I turned back. I felt an energy. It was, I guess, part RF, probably part magnetic. But I turned back, and as I was getting ready to leave, I just turned back to him and I said, "Thank you, brother. Thank you for your help. Thank you for guiding me this whole way." I went everywhere he went, Jake. I did his whole life,
Wow.
from the beginning where he was born all the way to, well, through Nauvoo, Illinois, and then into Carthage. And it was kind of like a bon voyage. It's this is where we kind of part for now. And then I started to cross west. But as you can imagine, I mean, it's incredibly. I think we Jake cut out for a minute here. I'll just keep talking if Jake comes back in, hopefully in a minute. But it was incredibly convincing, and it's just a beautiful thing to see that, because it gives you sort of direct evidence of the story. Jake, can you hear me? Okay, just apologize, guys. Just technology sometimes is a little bit strange. Okay, so Jake's gonna try to get back, guys. I think he might have lost internet for a minute, but I'll just talk a little bit more about my trip, the LDS story here, while we're waiting for Jake. And so, when you get kind of direct correspondence like that, it's really hard to say that this is not something that's real. Some people would say that that can come from your, that you're projecting that. I certainly did not feel that. It didn't feel that way. The condition of it felt, valid and accurate and authentic and everything. So it's one of those things where you just, you have to just kind of slow down and take the information as it comes. But the reason I went on that trip in the first place was because I felt that Joseph asked me to, and he wanted me to see his life apart from the development of the churches, which is totally different. He wanted me to see what he experienced, why he experienced it, to feel the energy in the different areas and everything. And that's absolutely what happened. It was absolutely brilliant. And then, of course, after that, I started to head west, and I went through, of course, Iowa. I had mentioned the swamps of Iowa. Council Bluffs, I believe, is the last. I believe that's in Iowa. Yeah, the last town in Iowa before you get to Nebraska, and that's where the second president of the church, Brigham Young, was sustained as president after Joseph Smith's death. And then, it was a hard go through Nebraska. Wasn't too bad from my understanding, because of the Platte River is quite fertile, and there was resources for the saints as they moved west. But through Wyoming was a challenging time, and there was a snowstorm, and a fair amount of people died, trying to cross the mountains and everything, even before the crossing the mountains to Utah. So it's a very interesting story, and I really recommend, if you guys are interested in even history, or if, to be quite honest, if you just want a good story, it's worth your time. It really is, and there's a lot there. There's a lot to unpack. I'm just gonna check, see if Jake's on the way back here. Just give me a second. Okay, so we're still working on that, guys. But in any case, I suppose we'll just have a little story time. I haven't really done this before, but I have obviously plenty I can talk about. And if Jake comes back today, great. If not, we'll have to follow up with that, which will be fine. So in any case, it's a wonderful story, and I thought I had enough information after reading the Book of Mormon, and I actually did not. The Doctrine and Covenants was absolutely essential to read that, and so I spent time doing that before, like I said, before my trip. And it turned out I needed to see the specific locations that actually things transpired, where the revelations were received. Essentially, there's another site in Ohio. It's called Hiram, Ohio, just a little bit south of Kirtland, where the first Mormon temple was built. According to Revelation, Joseph was asked to build the temple in Kirtland, Ohio. It's outside of Cleveland, just a little bit, eastern Ohio. And so the thing about it was that in Hiram, it's one of the many places that Joseph lived with his wife Emma, and it's a really beautiful story. I have a lot on my Instagram page too in terms of pictures. It's Dave Petrella 12 if you guys want to check that out. But the thing that's really interesting about that, is that one of the places they lived was called the John Johnson Farm. The owner of the house, of course, was John Johnson, and he was Joseph had so many people in his life that helped him at the exact right time, the exact correct time, that it was absolutely essential that they were to be there to help him and assist him at that moment. And so what ended up happening was Joseph had a revelation in the upper room. And, most of these places, if not almost all of them, you can go to and you can experience this, which again, if you've read the texts and that's not enough for you, then go to the sites. And they're you'll feel very welcome there. The church members, the LDS, most of them are owned by the LDS Church. Some of them are owned by another church called the Community of Christ, which is that's another Book of Mormon church, but they broke off after Joseph Smith died, actually, and one of his sons and his mother joined him, basically, one of Joseph's sons, and they kind of formed a branch off the church. And it branched many times. I couldn't believe how many different branches there are actually from the Mormon church. It was originally instituted by Joseph Smith as the Church of Christ, and then the name has changed. There's been different groups that have popped up, of course, through the years. So in any case, that upper room there, Joseph he got his revelations, and so some of the most important revelations. And what happened was there was an appearance, actually, and I believe it was I think it was the Father, if I'm not mistaken, in Christianity, God the Father, essentially. I could be mistaken about that. I think that's who it was. So anyway, what happens is that as you're walking through that room, it's on the upper story. Before you cross the threshold into that door, it's actually kind of a very it's a very neutral energy. It's nothing out of the ordinary. And the minute you cross into that threshold, into that room that this occurred in, it's actually it's a very different experience. And immediately it felt like a buzzing. There was a lot of electric current moving through the air, possibly magnetism as well. I didn't have actually, maybe I did, but it would have been rude to take out that EMF detector at that time, and so of course I refrained from doing that. But the point is that there was no mistaking it. I felt very different, and there was a different quality to the air, and the electricity in that room. And that's not something that I'm going to fabricate. I go in objectively to every situation. So, and I think that was one of the only places, that was probably the strongest one out of any of the sites I'd been to, believe it or not, was in Hiram, Ohio, at the John Johnson farm. And they'll tell you all about it, guys, if you get out there and to check that out. So that's it's one of those things where, even when you're doing science, and of course it was not all science, it's a spiritual story, and I was doing it for Joseph, and because I wanted to see what actually happened and to feel what actually happened. Because as people anyone who's watching my channel is probably aware that the minute that humans get their hands on a story, a lot of people try to use it for profit or for their own means or for whatever it is. And then the original message gets changed and or manipulated, and it can become a problem. So that's one of those things where if you try to get the firsthand experience, then it's much more likely, in my opinion, that you're going to come out with a good answer or an accurate answer. So I encourage people to, remain open, see it through to the end. And if you're interested in the topic, try to do all the things that are related to it. Read the texts, go to the locations, and you'd be, I think, very surprised what you can come up with. So that was Hiram, Ohio. Of course, Kirtland's amazing. Just to the north, 45 minutes. That's where the Saints LDS. Well, before it was. I'm trying to think if it was before it was LDS. It's right around that time, because the church was actually started. I suppose it was. Yeah, the name wasn't. I don't believe the name was not Latter-day Saints at the time, but the church was founded in April 6th, 1830, I believe, and that was in actually New York at the Whitmer farm, Peter Whitmer farm, which also is somewhere that you can visit. And it happened in a log home right there. That's on site. The reconstructed home, but it's amazing to see that and to be there. That was a powerful place too. I mean, it was a nice day, and then this storm kind of blew in out of nowhere, and I wasn't done doing my research. I wasn't done walking around, and so it was kind of slightly disappointing. I had to essentially go back the following day, I believe, and the following morning, and kind of finish what I was doing. Yeah, it was great. I don't know if they're original, but there's a little small apple orchard there. There's certain themes that kind of followed me through the different sites, and one of them was apples. Very interesting, especially because the apple story of the Garden of Eden. One of the revelations that Joseph Smith had was that the original Garden of Eden was actually in Jackson County, Missouri, of all places. And the first time I heard this revelation, or this idea, I actually I pushed it aside fairly fast. Again, I'm not being dismissive, but I had no context for it, and there was nothing. I couldn't really fit it in anywhere, and so it's one of those things where I don't discard it, but I kind of put it to the side while I'm thinking about it because I don't. It was one of those things where I don't really know what to do with it. I'm just gonna pause 1 second, guys. Yeah. So in any case, again, back to the apples. And the other place that the apples are at is the original farmhouse that kind of Joseph grew up in Palmyra. And there's an apple orchard. I'm told that they're heirloom apples. It's original genetics. I don't know if that's true, but I'll tell you this: I actually asked if I could take one so that I could have an apple because it's there for us to eat. Obviously, it's a gift from the earth, and so it was kind of late, fairly late. The sun had gone down, and I went over to the orchard, and it was really beautiful night, guys. I mean, there's deer everywhere. That was the other theme that followed me all the way through the sites that I went to. I think almost literally, I want to say at least 90% of the sites, the LDS sites I went to, there were deer there, and I'm talking across the country. It wasn't even localized. So that's something that's really interesting, and it's very relevant to me because again, when you see themes popping up, especially on these trips that incorporate lots of different occurrences and topics, and if you know about the tribes of Israel and everything, in terms of this is a big part of the story of the Mormon story, the LDS story is to gathering the tribes of Israel before the second coming of Jesus. And so the deer, it's one of those things. It's very very beautiful. I kind of had two separate, well, not separate, but there are two different experiences there. One was the fact that they're beautiful animals. It's just nice to see them, and they got quite close. They weren't really scared or really spooked very much. So it was the end of the night, and I had just actually come out of the sacred grove, which is behind where Joseph Smith grew up. That's where he had his first vision of the Father and the Son appearing to him, and it's just a fascinating story. It's absolutely an amazing story. I remember reading it when I was in school really quickly. Of course, it's kind of skimmed over. I went to a public school, non-affiliated with any kind of religion or spiritual teaching, so it's not something that they're going to really focus on. But in any case, what I did was I took my time, back in the grove there, and it was really nice because it's a fairly large, I guess I would say, trail system, and you can you get a little map and you can just take your time. It's a very contemplative place. There's benches and things and places to sit down. It's really, really beautiful place. And by the way, guys, it appears that Jake has lost power. Believe it or not, the one day that we kind of connect here for the show, which is it's fine. We'll come back and we'll do a part two. I guarantee that. Whenever Jake gets the power back, and then I'll upload that for you guys. So in any case, yeah, back to Sacred Grove. So I spent time back there. I've actually been there twice. The first time was 2018. The second time was last summer, 2022. And it's always been absolutely miraculous things that happened back there in terms of giving you proof of what happened in revelation. I say like personal revelation and things like that about what happened and about what I believe happened there. And there's no question that I believe something very important happened there. There's absolutely no doubt in my mind. And me having being open to the spirit world and to, for lack of a better term, paranormal experiences and things that are invisible, things that you cannot see, and also being someone who spends a lot of time with texts and reading and trying to understand stories on more of like an objective, let's say, scientific basis. it's something where you can kind of string different lines of thinking together and try to figure out. Again, it's one of these things where it's a full picture story, and it's something that you really need to try to be patient with if you want to understand it. And the other important thing too, I've said this on a lot of shows that I've done, is that you want to go in with humility. You want to go in with a humble heart, and you want to ask for the wisdom if it's something that wants to be given to you. That's always, I always make that statement. Sometimes I even say it aloud, or vocally. It's that if this is not something that wants to be given to me, or if I'm not ready for this according to the universe, whatever those cosmic principles might be, then I'm fine with that. I'm open to that, and I appreciate the experience. And when you go in with that kind of an attitude, you have generally very good things happen to you. There's very few things that were not that way when I go in with that attitude. And many of the times, actually, probably most of the times, there actually is a revelation that's associated with that experience or that occurrence. Going into that moment there, and being humble. It's a key to, in fact, it's a key to all spiritual teachings, is to have that humility, and things will be opened up to you if you can demonstrate that to the universe. And the universe, it can read energy signatures from the person. I say not only a person. I believe it's also animals and plants and just about anything in existence that it can read your energy signature, and it can read the heart. So if you're not aligned correctly, I guarantee you're not gonna figure out what you need to see. And it may not be time for everyone to do that, and that's fine. But it's one of these things where you'd be amazed at how much you can pick up if you go in with a quiet heart and humility, and asking for understanding, because that's really what I want. I just want the understanding. I want to know what happened from my perspective, energetically, specifically after having read the texts, going into this area and spending some time with the actual local energy. You'd be amazed what you can come out with. And again, you got to go in with the humility, though. Don't ever go in. Don't ever provoke anything. Don't ever go in with any arrogance. It's not going to happen. I guarantee that. Especially not with the high level spiritual concepts that have to do with higher levels of spirituality. I certainly don't think that's likely to happen if you don't go in with that humility. So in any case, back to this orchard story, and I'm probably going to talk for probably another half an hour, guys. About I just I've actually never really had an opportunity to do this and just talk, just me on the camera. So I've been thinking about doing a little bit more, just kind of checking in with everyone and talking about whatever topic kind of comes up. And today, since the stream cut off when I was talking about the Mormon story, I'm just going to go with that topic right now. So back at the orchard there, and this was a working farm, and of course back in the day, I mean, even nowadays, there's plenty of working farms across the country, but this area in particular, it's been preserved as a sort of a very rustic place, and it's really beautiful to see all the different um, natural things that are growing there. There's lots of animals, all kinds of everything you could possibly imagine. Of course, the highlight for me was the deer, because they were everywhere through the forests, and also through the pastures and fields and things like that. And so people had to do a lot of manual labor for their living. Back in the day, we didn't have these supermarkets and things. You grow your own food, you grow your own grasses for the livestock and things. And there was, of course, an orchard there, amongst, I'm sure, many other things that I don't even know about all of them that were there, but threshing floors and barns that were built, and I believe a cooper's shop, and you had to do everything kind of yourself, unless you have a neighbor that can help you with it. And in that case, you're either going to pay them or barter for things. But it's you're relying on yourself. You're relying on your family members to make sure that you have enough food and things. And I'm just going to pause for 1 second, guys. Okay, so anyway, being back at the orchard there, after I finished my time in the Sacred Grove, it was really remarkable because it was dusk, it was getting late. It was the summertime, I mean, it was nice, it's very nice, and of course, I try to travel. Well, actually, I kinda have to travel in the nice months. I mean, I do a lot of camping, and I'm not I kind of my rule on the road is that I don't camp if it's below 32 degrees Fahrenheit, which is freezing, for safety reasons and also because it's really not enjoyable, to be quite honest with you. Even for me, at least. I'm not a cold weather kind of person, so I don't favor that. And there's plenty of months during the year where it's nice enough that you can camp and you'd be fine. And it's actually, in a lot of ways, it's actually nicer to me than a hotel because you get clean air. You get to be with the animals and everything, and the plants and trees, and it's really it's an invigorating, healthy experience to be able to kind of experience that. So I come out of the sacred grove, and I had various things happen in that grove that were very revealing to me in terms of giving me understanding that there is something that in fact did happen there. I think I know where it happened. It's a fairly large area back there, but I actually walked across the entire area. And probably in this episode, I'm probably not going to talk too much more about that, but we'll leave it the fact that there were things that happened when I was walking through there that convinced me that in fact something in fact did happen back there, something supernatural. Let me put it that way. That there was an appearance of some kind. I did feel that it was very localized too. You know, it's one of those things again where if you're trusting your body to give you information about the environment, you can generally pick up on things in terms of if there's variances in energy fields and things like that in terms of what you're looking for. But when I came out of the grove, it's a really beautiful trail. It's an old road, I guess, you know, for some kind of vehicle. I don't know if it was original. I tend to think it was. It feels original to me. It feels like that's where you would have kind of come out of the woods there. And it's a fairly, I don't know, it's probably about half a mile, maybe maximum walk back to the farm area when you come out of the woods behind it. And I went to the grove there. There's an apple grove, an apple orchard. And I had, of course, been given permission. So I just had an apple. I actually had a couple apples, and they were, it's kind of amazing. Again, that's one of those things that had to actually be the right time of the year. Otherwise, I wasn't going to be able to have any because they wouldn't have been ripe. There may not have even been apples on the tree if it was in like you know, mid spring or something. There may have been flowers and stuff, but it takes a while, obviously, for the fruit to mature. So yeah, I just pulled a couple apples off the tree, and before I actually had, I forgot about this. I actually had to wait about I don't know, probably 5 minutes maybe, and I was completely happy doing that because actually, believe it or not, the deer were in the orchard when I walked up to it. And I didn't want to disturb them. I wanted them to make sure that they had enough food to eat, obviously, that you know that they were nourished as well. Because for me, I didn't really, well, either way. I mean, I didn't actually need food, but the fact of the matter is that you want to respect the natural world, you know. And it's not something. It's not even like a. It's not even like something that I. It's not something that I do because that's what I should do. It's because actually that's what I want to do. And then I also believe that's what I should do. I believe that's what everyone should do, but it's not up to me how other people act. You know, I'm in charge of myself. I try to provide guidance if I can. But we're all on our own life path. So in any case, I waited for them to clear out, and then I went in there, and they were eating actually apples off the ground. There's a lot of apples that had fallen onto the ground, and some of them were, you know, fairly decomposed. Some of them are more fresh. I don't know which ones they choose. One of the things I was actually thinking about is that if you eat, you know, people are aware of this, I'm sure, especially people that produce different types of alcohol in terms of how that works. But some alcohol is produced from fruit, obviously, and if it's been sitting there a while, there's going to be some alcohol content in it. So I wouldn't be surprised if the deer have that experience. Actually, you know, that they might feel the effects of the natural alcohol production in the fruit, and it's probably pretty nice for them, you know. And I'm assuming that most animals are very in touch with their biorhythms. Absolutely, we should be better about it as humans. I think we're trying to get, well, some people are trying to get back to that, but I'm sure they would stop, you know, when they feel like they've had enough or whatever that might mean. But it's nice to think about how you know, most of the natural world, the animals have what they need. They know how to find it. They know how to find safety and shelter and from storms and all kinds of things like that. So it was great. It was really great. I went in there. I got a couple apples off the tree. I ate probably like one and a half or something like that. Tossed the other half back on the ground. I was confident that it would be eaten, and if not, it's amazing because these are all obviously biodegradable things, so you don't really have to worry about discarding. It's going to be fine, even potentially good for the environment, creation of soil. Um, if it was in the natural world, not in a farm, in terms of fertilizing, it's brilliant for fertilizing. In fact, that's essentially the whole point, is that you have the energy which is around the seed in the fruit that helps to fertilize the actual seed. Well, normally it would fall off of the tree and it would sprout spontaneously by itself. The other thing that happens is, and this is absolutely genius. This is one of these things that I learned, I think, in probably senior year of high school in my AP biology course that I was taking, is that you have sometimes different kinds of distribution of seeds. In some cases, the seed of the fruit, it can fall, or the vegetable even, can fall out of off of the tree or off of the plant, and it actually can fertilize the ground right alongside the plant. And what ends up happening in the natural world, if you haven't pruned it and you're not farming it or whatever, is that it will in fact grow. And if it doesn't get enough sunlight, or if it doesn't get enough nutrients, because the plant next to it is taking it has a larger tap root or whatever, it's taking all the nutrients from it. Or if there's a canopy of trees above it, it might not sprout, or if it does, it might not actually last very long. So there's a couple other ways that this happens, though, in terms of seed distribution, is that if it happens to be, I suppose, probably not a fruit, but if you think about dandelions, this is absolutely genius. Absolutely genius. They're not an animal, so they can't move in the sense of a biological organism moving, such as a mammal or an insect or something. So it has to find another way to fertilize and distribute its seeds. And so the dandelion actually produces seeds, and they're lofted above the plant in the wind. And then, that seed can end up 100,000 feet, whatever, as long as it's airborne, all the way across the way. And that's how the plant moves. Its progeny moves across the land. It's one of the big ways you have distribution of plants. And even with spores, that's a big one too, in terms of the fungus or the fungi kingdom, is that they actually will, there's power behind it. They don't just, sometimes they fall, but sometimes they actually are shot. They're shot off of the fruiting body of that mushroom, and then that's how that plant moves. It's not the typical, like an animal moving with its legs, but it nonetheless, it finds a way to do that. And I'm just going to keep talking for a minute here, but it's really amazing, because the natural world, it has ways to do things that are absolutely brilliant, genius level, and it shows you how much intelligence is actually in the system. In this case, I'd say within the Earth system. Oh, it's amazing. But anyway, this is a perfect example too, how all the disciplines are connected. And if you don't know about biology and you're trying to figure out spirituality things, or I'll give you a good example of this too, is that sometimes you have a tree that's in a very strange shape, and you're walking through the woods and it kind of startles you, and you're like, wow, that's weird. You wonder how that happened. Some of the I think there's a forest in Romania, actually. It's one of the stories I know that relates to this. But if you have an energy field around a developing plant, there are some people, including myself, that believe that the plant will actually grow into that energy field and express whatever that is in like a physical format. So the way to think about it is that the energy, the invisible energy, actually will get sort of materialized. It will become physical, become matter, because it's actually growing into that field that exists alongside of it, or above it, or whatever. It's a very interesting thing, very, very interesting thing, because they're absolutely connected. The spirit realm, the biological realm, the realm of matter and physicality, and all of that. They're not separate at all, and they actually work alongside of each other. So anyway, in that forest, that's one of those things that happens. The trees are growing at kind of strange angles, and people. There are actually lots of spirit stories associated with that area, and even independent of the fact that the trees look a little strange, people see things there all the time. Flying beings and spirits and like ghosts and things and whispering and all these things. So it's just part of the territory, it's just part of what you have to work with. It's kind of part of what's there. So in any case, let's see, back to the apple story. I was talking about natural fertilization and how that works in the plant and animal kingdom there. But the deer, obviously, I don't know how. Like, I've never been close enough to see it. I'm assuming that they essentially will eat the whole apple, and that's kind of, I guess, how nature intended it, unless you happen to be extraordinarily intelligent and you're being really specific about what you eat. And I have, in fact, seen bear up close. I've actually seen this in person. I've seen brown bear eating and feeding on salmon, and I've watched them. In person. I've also seen lots of videos on it. And one of the things that they do, especially late in the season, is that they don't. They're trying to prepare for hibernation, and so they have to do like a last ditch effort to get all the possible calories that they can. So you'll watch them, and they'll actually they'll bite the it's a little bit descriptive, but it's just how it works. It's the natural world. They'll bite the head off of the salmon. They eat the head, and they're eating it for the fatty brain tissue because they need that fat for the winter. And then they're not done after that. They'll actually pull the skin off with their teeth and eat the skin and leave the meat. And they'll do this with many of the salmon that are jumping, through the stream there. And the salmon, they're spawning, they're trying to procreate as well at the same time. And the bears know where to go at that time so that they can have good quality food. So it's interesting in terms of nature being able to delineate the different ideas and what the best way to go about doing things for especially sustenance and good quality nutrients and survival and stuff. So that's an example of an animal, I suppose, being very specific about what it eats, and it's because it could eat the whole fish, but if it eats the whole fish, then a lot of the meat from that fish is kind of, it's not that it's unneeded, but its stomach is really going to fill up fast. You fill up your stomach with fat, just fat, which the skin, by the way, has a lot of fat as well in the salmon. Then you're going to be getting the highest density of nutrients, and that's kind of the idea because they don't have a lot of time before winter, and they have to make sure they're getting the most fat. The fat is very dense fuel, and it's very good for the brain as well. So they know what to do. So in the case of the deer, I don't know. I'm assuming they eat the whole apple, but what ends up happening is that will move through its body with the seed. By the way, with the seeds intact, generally speaking. And then when the animal obviously goes to the bathroom, relieves himself through the intestinal tract, then you have actually natural fertilizer. And imagine that is that the seed is actually deposited naturally in that natural fertilizer, and it's left on the ground. And many times it's left on the ground a fair distance from where that animal ate that fruit. Again, it's absolutely genius because the apple tree, it gives the deer something nice to eat, and in return, it's all, the natural world is really, it's very symbiotic. It's this give and take. That's how it's sustained through a cycle, loop, positive feedback loop. And so maybe the deer, I mean, it might have even ran 2 miles, maybe where it eats is like 2 miles away from its house. And so then it goes back at nighttime and maybe it relieves itself over, closer to where they live. And then suddenly you have a new orchard growing 2 miles away. And all the tree had to do was to provide something that was delicious to that animal and that was nutritive. And the animal will gladly, they're not even aware they're doing that, obviously, but we can see that when we obviously look and see, do a survey of the land and see what happened, where the deer are traveling, stuff like that. But anyway, that's a little aside. But it was a really brilliant evening, and most people had left, and that area is open, I believe, 24 hours a day for meditation and prayer, and to be able to walk through the area and talk to God if people believe in that, or whatever you believe in. It's up to you. It's a personal experience. So a really, really beautiful area. And they're really good apples, much smaller. They're much smaller because they're not, genetically modified, and they actually had a much more vibrant flavor and very clear to me, a lot more nutrients. It was very, very helpful in terms of that, in terms of the nutrient profile. So it was a great experience. Um, they were more tart, because it's not being, they're smaller and they're not being cultivated in the same way as the modern farming methods, which is totally fine with me. They had blemishes, a couple of them might have had a worm or two, no big deal, no big deal. There's that song, I don't care about spots on my apples, leave me the birds and the bees, and that's it. That's it right there. I feel the same way. I don't want wax on my apples. I don't want anything weird. I don't want it sprayed with anything. I'm fine. If there's a rotting spot, I'll tell you what you do. You just take your thumb and you just carve it out, put the rotting part on the ground, let it fertilize into new soil, and then you're good to go, and just enjoy it. And the nice thing is, like I said before, is that if you don't eat all of it, you just leave the rest on the ground and it will, of course, biodegrade. So it's a really, it's just an amazing system. When we live in accordance with the natural rhythms of the planet, things work out how they're supposed to, is what I would say. And we need to try to get back to that as much as possible to make that happen if we want to establish the natural order, which is actually, it turns out that what actually benefits us most physically and spiritually, the whole system, is when you're doing things. The minute that you start fighting nature, the natural process, there's going to be failure with that system because it doesn't want you to do that. And you can even extend that to the spiritual realm, the spiritual world, in terms of that. If you're a good person, you have a pure heart, and you have humility, the universe will honor that and bring you wonderful and good things and peace in your life. And I see that happen all the time. But if you are not projecting that kind of energy, then generally that's not what comes back to you, because it's one for one. You attract the energy that you're putting out. It's essentially one of the main cosmic laws. There is something else interesting that happens, though. I've had times where the energy might not have quite matched what my message was, but I will actually make that statement, and I will say, I'm sorry right now, guys. I'm not feeling amazing, but please don't take it as this is what I'm trying to project. It's just the fact that maybe there's some kind of imbalance in my system that I'm trying to work through. But I make it. That's what I do. Is I always make it clear. I always say it up front, because I don't want the person to take it the wrong way if I'm not fully like myself, balanced and relaxed and happy and things like that. So that's one of those things. If you help people understand it, it makes it a lot easier. But you can't understand it unless you can make the connection between. I'm specifically really referring to food. Is that, and anything that you ingest or any kind of liquid or anything. If you're not processing it fast enough, if you're not moving it through your body, if your elimination channels have not been set up correctly, things like that, then you're not going to be getting to that point where it's going to be um, working for you, meaning that you have a healthy system and you can think clearly and you can be relaxed and kind and all that stuff. And it's not an excuse, but I'm just saying, especially as you get older, is that you take these. Some people, actually, most people probably take it for granted. It's like, oh yeah, I'll always be able to be nice to people and kind. Well, I'm just saying, if you have a medical condition and you can see people as they age, and people say all the time, well, my grandmother's changed. She's not like how she used to be, or my aunt has really changed. And most of the time, it's not because, I guarantee you, it's not because they wanted to do that, or if they're a little snippy or something. If you're dying, you don't have the power you need to be relaxed and potentially kind and as generous as you normally would be if you were healthy. So it's one of those things that's important to make that distinction. If you can understand why you're not feeling at your best, and then you can establish the pattern, then you can try to make that not happen, next time. And that's the key for me, is that you want it to be something where you're in control of it as much as possible, and for the right reasons too. When I say in control, it really is just you're establishing the natural rhythm in your body. So it's not like you're not trying to control nature or anything like that. You're not trying to get things to go your way. You're trying to actually just get in accordance with the natural rhythms, and that will establish health and balance, really. And when you're truly balanced, I mean, you're really, some people don't experience it much in their lives, and some people maybe hardly ever, but you'll feel naturally happy and naturally relaxed, and that's the key. It's even the key to topic of alchemy, which is something that I was going to bring up with Jake in terms of the ancient traditions, and we'll bring it up next time for sure, or in a few weeks maybe, hopefully. Um, But it's one of those things where you really want all the disciplines to come together, and you can believe whatever you want. But what I try to do is I try to establish that it's the Earth system. The Earth system has been designed a specific way with specific laws, and if you don't understand what those laws are, then you're working with 10% of what you need for success. So in terms of astrology, even is that if you don't understand what your birth chart means, if you don't understand the alignments of the planets and everything, how that relates to your interactions with other people, even in terms of how you can always find it in the charts when you put them alongside each other. You're just not working with a full deck of cards, so to speak, and you may be a little bit limited in what you can achieve if that's in fact what you're dealing with. But people often don't realize that there's systems they're not understanding, and there's reasons why they're having issues because they're missing the point, or they don't have the amount of information they need to have the correct kind of understanding. And that's really important to establish. I mean, I can't even stress how important that is, because you want it to be something where again, you have full understanding, and when you have full understanding and you can establish the natural order or the natural rhythm, then you're going to be getting to a much better place. And in fact, that's a lot of what Francis Bacon talked about. Me and Jake, we're going to get into Francis Bacon a lot too, of course. We'll do that next time. But he was the father of the scientific method, and because of that, he taught people to look at the natural world, use natural reasoning abilities to follow clues and to follow signs, and to establish understanding. And in fact, I believe that when we're talking about sites like Oak Island and the site and Ryan Plaster has in Arkansas, you're looking at if they did happen to be Rosicrucian sites, which a lot of people believe that Francis Bacon founded Rosicrucianism and Freemasonry. I believe Jake is among those people that believe that. Then if you're going to hide something, a treasure, or text, or documents, or the Ark of the Covenant, or whatever, you need to do it in a way that people can logically follow your train of thinking, and that's the proper way to reason through things. So it's not something where it's going to be buried in this obscure location and there's no chance that anyone's going to find it. That's not the objective. The objective is to make it so that a riddle or a text or a cipher or whatever. There's many different ways. I've approached it often from a scientific perspective, which would mean numbers and measurements and angles and things. Looking at the land, walking across the land, feeling the energy, things like that. And then it's brilliant because then when you have someone like Jake that comes along who can add a cipher to the mystery and to the information, that's something that's not my skill set. I don't even have a lot of interest in ciphers, to be quite honest, but I find them actually really intriguing and amazing. In terms of if I were to encode something, it wouldn't be, for me, if I did it, it would not be in a cipher. It would be in the natural world, directly in the natural world, and which is also done. I mean, that's part of that's, in my opinion, that's part of the Rosicrucian motto and how they approach things. So that is actually consistent. But for me, and I get it. And Jake's talked about this a lot too. I've also talked about a lot. If you want to make sure that people will one day find whatever you hid, for humanity, for the future at the right time, then one of the best ways to do that is to put it into a text that is never going to disappear. And examples of that, of course, would be the Bible. That's one of the biggest ones. Put it in the Bible, and that's going to endure the test of time. It's going to be reprinted. Sometimes, in fact, a lot of times, there's issues with different versions being established that don't have sort of the original text or the original even configuration of texts. That's something that Jake talks about, and also Ryan Plaster talked about that a lot. The original editions have things a lot of times that the later editions don't. Sometimes vice versa, but generally for me, the first edition is kind of the highest quality, because that's how usually it was intended to be written and interpreted and things. And a lot of times that will include pictures, texts, all this kind of stuff. So put it in a text is not going to disappear. Of course, one of those texts is the Bible. And one of the other big ones is the folios of Shakespeare, of course. I've read a fair amount of Shakespeare in high school, and I was always very impressed with the level of quality. I'll put it that way. It's just amazing the way the phrasing, like the syntax and all this stuff, how the words are ordered, how they're like lofting up into the air. It's just they're like light as a feather, and they're just brilliant, like scintillating. It's absolutely amazing. There are ways to arrange words, of course, that are more tend to be more beautiful, in my opinion, than other ways. Even which language you use can dictate that, in terms of if you're feeling something to be more balanced or in line, or beautiful, however you want to look at that. There's lots of ways to do that, but Shakespeare's works are absolutely brilliant. And the kind of the big argument today is that it wasn't actually William Shakespeare that wrote these texts. And actually, Peter Amundsen, who he's a Norwegian theorist. He was one of the first theorists on Oak Island for the television show The Curse of Oak Island, which is on the History Channel. Of course, it's the same show that I participated in 2017 and 2018. And I think this was back in probably 2013. It was the first season. We're at season 10 now, and he presented what he called the Tree of Life, that he actually, which is the Kabbalah, essentially, if you know those, the mystical Jewish tradition called the Kabbalah, or the Tree of Life. And he drew it on the map of Oak Island, and associated with what was called Nolan's Cross, which is a large megalithic cross on the island. And he said it was actually not so much a cross, but it was actually, well, it was a cross, but it's also a expanded cross, which is called the Tree of Life, which has the 10 Sephiroth, which are the the points, the 10 points, essentially the path to ascension, is how it's taught in the esoteric Judaism topic. So that's one of those things where I saw that come up on TV. I saw it in passing. I actually walked past the TV, and I saw that it was on. Someone else was watching it, and I actually paused and I said, "Wow, this is really interesting." And I saw the visual. I saw the Kabbalah being placed onto the map of Oak Island there, and I took an interest immediately. And I said, "All right, this is something that I have not spent time with." And it came to my attention that I should spend time with it, because it's an important part of one of the spiritual traditions on this planet, on Earth. And it gave me the opportunity to research that. And actually, one of the very first maps that I drew turned out to be the Tree of Life. And I was trying to, the thing that's important about this is that the Tree of Life is based on what's called the Flower of Life pattern, which essentially, the easiest way for me to explain that is it's kind of the grid work that ether is made up of. Ether is really the first element that all of the other elements come through when you're talking about like platonic solids and how things are materialized in a physical nature, physical form. So it's like the black framework behind all, before light is solidified into matter. It's like that black background, and it is in fact, according to ancient teachings, patterned as like a flower. And I believe it's a six petaled flower, and it's just a really beautiful symbol. I recommend, even with a meditation, just pull up a picture of that, or print it out, or frame something. It's just really beautiful to look at, really, really beautiful. So and that's like the core of quantum physics for me, to understand these symbols, and how they're related and what they mean. So the Flower of Life symbol, what happens is that the Tree of Life is actually inscribed on top of that symbol, and there's very specific measurements that are associated with that. I believe it has to be a 5x8 pattern, a grid pattern, to make a proper Tree of Life. And it also, I believe, happens to be the number of RC's tomb, the Rosicrucian tomb. I believe it's supposed to be 5x8. That's one of those things that seems to be consistent. But the problem is that when I applied that, when I drew that for myself and I was trying to apply it, I couldn't get the dimensions of this cross as they exist on the island to actually match the Kabbalah format. And it's, I still have it in my notebook. That was I think the first drawing that I ever did. It was the first research that I ever did in relation to Oak Island, the Oak Island mystery. And so I determined that it couldn't be the Kabbalah, because the orientation, but the dimensions did not appear to be consistent with the Flower of Life pattern, which is what it's supposed to be based off of. However, recently, which is very interesting, and just give me 1 second, pause for a second here. Okay, recently what came up is that I've had other reason to believe, actually through Jake Jake Roberts' show on Ghost of Bacon, that I believe Ghost of Bacon. He's either that or on Jeff Freeman's podcast. He runs an Oak Island podcast. So in any case, what came up was the fact that it was Jeff Freeman's show. That's right, because Jake was talking about the 1611 King James Bible, which we're really excited to talk about today. We'll do it next time for sure. And the thing about it that was interesting is that there's a cipher. There's actually many ciphers in there. In fact, I haven't seen the end of. No one's seen the end of them yet. It just keeps on going. There's lots of people working from different angles, which I think is fantastic. And that's how we'll get the answers. We gotta work together and form a cohesive group of people and a solid team. And teamwork. I guess it makes the dream work. It's a cliche phrase, but I agree with that. You have to get good groups of people together who have integrity, and you're going to come out on top for sure. I guarantee that if you do it right. So what's interesting about it is that it recently came up from this map in the King James Bible. There's a depiction of the old city of Jerusalem, and it's drawn. You can see it's like an aerial view of Jerusalem in this one of these pages in the 1611 Bible, King James Bible. And so I'm looking at this, and the ciphers and the lines that are drawn they appear to be indicating that there's an association with Oak Island. And I had never seen this before. I mean, I don't even know. It was December. I think it was December that I saw this. And I know better than to assume that I have what I need. There's always additional information that's added, and I'm always very open to it, even though I usually don't have time. That's the problem, is I don't have time for all these things that I want to do and read. But the universe finds a way to get them in front of me if I need to go back to it, if I need to revisit it. And again, it's not because I didn't want to, it's because I didn't have time. So it's one of these things where it kind of came back, this topic, and I'll let Jake explain it when he comes back on the show. But in terms of Oak Island potentially being related to Jerusalem, story of Jerusalem and the Knights Templar, potentially Francis Bacon, Rosicrucianism, Freemasonry, all this stuff. It's all somehow in there. But I came out in support of Jake's cipher coming from that map, that 1611 King James Bible map. And I didn't think I was going to do that. I had no idea, but I watched the show because I hadn't watched Jake's videos in a while, and I wanted to see what he was discovering. Again, it's, being open to different avenues of information. You'd be amazed at what you can discover, but you have to be willing to do that, willing to go there. So it's one of those things where I actually saw that Jerusalem appeared to be related to Oak Island. And in fact, some indications, I think it was from it might have been season 1. It was either season 1 or season 2 of The Curse of Oak Island. But the team goes to Scotland, and there's a couple people that relate to them, that Alan Butler and Kathleen McGowan, actually, that relate to the team, that there's a legend that the New Jerusalem is going to be built on Island of Swamp, which is potentially Oak Island, because Oak Island's an island and there's a swamp right in the middle of the island. So it's an amazing kind of matchup. It's one of these very interesting things. Just give me 1 second, guys. Okay, so one of these very interesting things where when you see these correlations that appear to be much more than coincidence, it really something that we should be paying attention to in terms of coming out with meaning. That's you want to follow those trains of thought. So when I saw this map come back up in association specifically with Oak Island, I started, and this was a couple months ago, I started thinking maybe the Kabbalah is actually involved with this. But as I had mentioned at the beginning of this podcast, is that a lot of times you have multi-levels of meaning and they're all stacked on top of each other. And so you have to be willing to incorporate the different levels if you're trying to come out with a full meaning, in my opinion. And that's when you're going to come out with the most broad interpretation, in my opinion. And that's based on science, and collecting data and drawing solid conclusions and stuff like that. So what I think is that I think Nolan's cross, which again Peter Amundsen claimed is the tree of life, and he had fairly good evidence. It was from Shakespeare's folio. He drew lots of geometric shapes and lines and came up with the mercy point and all of these things, and associated that with a point in the swamp on Oak Island. And I'll let you guys watch it if you want to. It's a brilliant story. I'd encourage people to to see the whole thing kind of through how that happened. So in any case, it came back up recently that since Jerusalem is being indicated to me to be a big part of what Oak Island is about, then I've revisited actually. I've revisited the topic, the Kabbalah topic, because that's esoteric Judaism, and it's something that has come up again, and so I revisited it, and I think it's one of those things where it's probably multiple things at the same time. And again, I don't want to talk about what Jake has said. I'd like for him to share it actually because he did such a great job. But Jake believes Nolan's Cross is something slightly different. I've kind of expanded Nolan's Cross in my research and what I've presented in the War Room, back in 2017. And then there's also the Kabbalah one. And then there's also, hundreds of other people drawing lines and angles and stuff. It was just on the show actually last week on TV on Tuesday. It's on Tuesday nights if you guys want to catch it, if you got cable, on the History Channel. And it's one of those things where it's just always expanding. But it's also one of those things where if you don't have the latitude, or I guess would be the word to use, if you don't have the time or the ability, if you don't have the permission, let me put it that way, to expand on what you're doing, then you have to be, when you're doing research, when you're doing science, you have to be ready to expand or to kind of pivot. That's the word I like to use, is pivot. You have to be able to and willing to pivot at the right time. If something doesn't quite fit, you want to be able to look at that and say, okay, so now what happens? I don't like give up on it, because I know that there's something else I can expand with it, or I can kind of refine it to be something more effective or more relevant, put it that way. So it's one of these things where you can't figure it out in a day. You can't even figure it out in a few days. And what's been suggested to me too with the island is that it's not I'm friends with a lot of channelers and people who are in the paranormal community, psychics, all kinds of people. My friend group is very broad, and because of that, I have access to lots of different information, some of which I'm not, I can't even do myself. I value those people very highly, and without them, there's a lot of information I wouldn't have found. So I'm extremely thankful, and I think we should all try to be thankful for each other, because we don't all have the same skill sets, and that's totally fine. And I think that actually keeps things very interesting, in my opinion there. So I just needed to revisit that. I'm still kind of working on some of those measurements again in terms of the Kabbalah, but it's one of these things where you have to be able to develop your idea fully. And obviously, unfortunately, if you don't own the land, you can't do that. I obviously don't own the land. I actually also don't think it's time for whatever's there to be recovered. So I just sit back and enjoy the show. I'm totally fine with that. No problem. And the nice thing too is that there's a lot more locations that are worth investigating and trying to follow up on, and seeing what you can come up with. It's the world's our oyster. There's always places you can develop ideas and come up with things that are going to be helpful. So that's a little bit, I guess, about Oak Island there. Well, me and Jake will talk, of course, a lot more about that topic, and also about Ciphers and about some of the work that he's done. And we'll get into that next time when his internet is restored again. So it's a very interesting thing. I mean, I love all of these topics. I'm so glad that you guys enjoy my channel and the videos. Obviously, going to keep putting them out for everyone. For me, it's about getting the message out to the world, getting people to pay attention. I'm happy to be one of those people that helps other people to stay organized, try to organize the ideas, because that's a skill set. I mean, it's not necessarily easy to do. It takes I would say many years of the right kind of on the ground training. You want to actually, it's not enough to read a textbook. You also need to get in the field and actually work with the information. So that's one of those things that, of course, I'm always working with when I'm looking at the different problems or trying to problem solve things. Figuring out what's the next step is, how to move correctly, also how to move respectfully and to do what's right for what's going to bring the most good things to everyone. It's not about me. It's about the world. So it's a world story. It really is. And it's one, of course, the reasons that I study ancient religions and ancient traditions and astrology from different parts of the world, because it's a world story. And even when you're talking about something specific like the Book of Mormon or the Mormon or LDS religion, you're talking about an ascended master figure, named Jesus, of course. And it's one of these things where I read the Book of Revelation back in the day, which is the last book of the Bible, and it's a really wild book, guys. I mean, if you haven't read it, it's very, 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 very strange. And it was from a vision that I believe it was one of the apostles had on an island, a cave actually, on an island in Greece. And I think it was John. I'm not sure which John or what the rest of his name was, but he it may have been John from the one of the four Gospels there, the beginning of the Bible, at the beginning of the New Testament, excuse me. So in any case, it's John the Revelator, I believe. So it's one of those things where you look at it and initially you say this is absolutely ridiculous. It's like it's just beyond strange. You have all these creatures appearing in the sky and trumpets and seals and whatever a seal is. I have plenty of feelings for what that is. One of which is the chakra. That's the chakra in the human body is one of the seven seals. Absolutely, it is. But again, I think there's things on all levels have to be be accounted for. It's not something where you're just going to say, oh, it's this. Well, generally, what I found from my experience is that it's usually this plus this other thing, and then no, don't stop there. There's another 5 or 6 things you got to stack on that before you're going to get the full story. A lot of people stop short of fully investigating into it, but the other part of it is there's also a lot of people that don't have not only the bandwidth, but they don't have the knowledge base to be able to pull from all the things that they need in order to actually put things together. And that's a separate thing. And that's one of the things I'm very thankful for with Jake in particular is because I can count on him to come up with extremely good information. I know he's already cross-checked it himself. Of course, I'm going to cross-check it myself, probably multiple times. And the nice thing about it is that with people like Jake, I can share what I believe it is, and it's not going to necessarily break his conviction. If that's what he feels it is, then I'm sure specifically Jake's going to be firm on that, which I think is great. But if someone presents information that either adds to the puzzle or expands it or slightly modifies it, I also know Jake's someone that's going to look at it, and he's going to look at it respectfully and seriously, hear the person out, and then it's okay. Just because someone has a different opinion, you can still listen to them and give them the respect of telling their story. And then at the end of that period, you can say, yeah, I don't really believe it, and that's totally fine. That is totally fine. But it's really nice, and it's also incredibly important when you're trying to get information or gain information and knowledge, excuse me, to be open to other people's viewpoints, because that's really when you can come out with things that that you normally wouldn't have had access to, which is really the story of my life. A lot of things I do discover, of course, on my own, but there's a huge amount of things that I'm finding on YouTube videos and articles and books. I've been reading books all winter, since October, or even before the winter. I probably read probably 15 books maybe. I've got another few before I get on the road again in the springtime. So I try not to. All the different mediums, are at play with me or for me, and that it's one of those things where I'm not relying on one to completely drive the narrative. I'm pulling from whatever resource is available to me, and generally things are put in front of me at the time that I need them. And so if specifically if something comes into my field of view that's seems to be really relevant, before I even open the front cover, if it happens to be a book, I already know I'm going to find something incredibly relevant. And that actually happened 2 nights ago. Again, it happens every day, really. But I said to my friend, I'm like, I don't know what's going to be in here tonight, but it's going to be something that I need. And the first page, it was actually I think even like a footnote. It was a very obscure concept that it's hardly ever talked about. And it came up front and center for me. And of course, I knew. I said, yeah, I didn't even have, it was before, I was even before the introduction. I think it was right there in the beginning, one of those first pages. And so that was the key to, well, I mean, they're all keys. Every there's a key in every page, really. When you're going through texts, if it's something that's been meant for you to look at. So it's all there. All the information's there. There's, I think, better ways to research things, and we just have to keep at it. We really have to keep at it and try to develop a team that you can count on. You know, people that are not going to be, another big one for me too is that people who are not going to be offended if you disagree with them. My thing is really one of my big things is your approach to disagreeing with someone. You know, you can say it just like I'm talking right now. You can say it in a very level way, a very balanced way, a very non-provoking, non-offensive, non-condescending, and you know, it's going to be received. Generally speaking, it's going to be received a lot better. I believe in as much as possible being able to fully express ourselves. You know, and that's also how you figure things out. And one of the things I was going to say to Jake before we lost him there because of the I think it was a power outage actually, um, is that I am very happy. As I mean this from the bottom of my heart. I'm very happy to give full credit to whoever deserves it. I would also say that I expect full credit if I'm the one that presented something. You know, I expect that because, hey, I'm the one that did it. If that's the case, not always the course, it's not always the case. But if that is the case, yeah, I expect credit for that. Absolutely. I don't expect like worship for that. I'm just saying, you know, you give credit to the person that brought the information forward. I always reference Santo Spinacci, my friend Santo Spinacci. Go check out his channel, guys. I say it all the time, Mr. Astrotheology. It's on YouTube. He's a wealth of knowledge. He's a good friend, and I'm deeply thankful for what he's contributed to the world. I'm the one that, excuse me, no, I'm not the one. He's the one that I learned the basic principles of astrology from before I developed it into the system that I use now. That was 2015. He's the one that taught me about how the Bible, among other things, is a book of astrotheology, which means that there's references to stars and planets. It's also a biological reference manual, which is one of the most obscure ways to interpret the Bible. One of the examples of that is, of course, Abraham. Abraham is well, it's actually, excuse me, it's Abraham and his wife from the Old Testament. His wife's name was Sarah, and he was Abraham. Well, what happens when you put those two names together? You get cerebrum, which is the cerebrum, which is, of course, up here. It's the brain, the fore part of the brain right there. So, and that's not the only one, believe me, it does not end. The amygdala, that's Mary Magdalene, and in the brain again. You've got the cherubim, which again, the angels guarding the perfect date to talk about it, but the Ark of the Covenant. They're sitting on top of the Ark of the Covenant, facing each other with their wings out. And that's the cerebrum. The cherubim, cerebrum. That's not a stretch of meaning. They're almost identical words. And the other thing that happens is that there's a bone, excuse me, there's a bone in your head. It's called the sphenoid bone. It goes from the temple it's called the temple for a reason, guys. I mean, it's one of the most holy places in the human body, the body temple. The body temple is the temple that's been built without hammer and nail. That's called the human body. So anyway, right where the temples are on the head, if you go into the interior of the head there, the cavity, there's a bone called the sphenoid bone, and sure enough, it looks exactly like two angels facing each other with the wings outstretched away from each other. That bone looks like that depiction. And then I believe I learned this from Santos. If not, it was an offshoot of one of his videos. But when you look beneath that, there's a receptacle, and it's like a little box. It's what I've been understanding it to look like. It's a little box beneath these angels, and in that box is the pituitary gland. And guess what the pituitary gland looks like? It looks like the Ten Commandments, and that's what was said to be in the Ark of the Covenant. It's actually it's a double-lobed endocrine gland. You know, so when I say double-lobed, I'm talking like Ten Commandments with the curving tops like that. That's the reason why that is depicted that way. Or it's a direct relation. I mean, you can parse them out however you want in terms of levels of meaning, but that's a direct indication of that. Absolutely. And the order doesn't always matter of how you interpret it, but what matters is if you're getting the information correct. So in any case, I'm trying to remember what I was talking about with Santos, but he's oh right. So of course, astrology. I learned the basics of astrology from him. I learned that the Bible is astrotheological book having to do with stars and planets. And then it's also a book of biology of the human body. And among other things, I tend to believe it was probably also a real story. There's a lot of people that debate that and argue that, saying that there's no reference for historical figures. I don't know what happened, guys. I wasn't there to see it. I always say that to people. I'm like, I'm going to go with what my best understanding of it and the best I can do for my interpretation. And then at the end, I'm going to say, you know what? I wasn't there to see it. So this is my best guess. It's not really a guess, but it's my best interpretation. It's my best conclusion. And I usually also say, excuse me, that it's a working conclusion, which means if there's other things that come up, I'm happy to entertain that. It's not something where you're going to say, for me, I'll speak for myself. It's not something where I'm going to say, oh, that's ridiculous. I'm not going to look at that just because I'm stuck on I'm happy with my idea. Especially if you get momentum with your idea and you get recognition for that or financial gain or whatever, you're going to be a lot less likely. That's one of the issues with science too, is that money corrupts everything, in my opinion. I really wish there was a way, and I know there is, but in the field that we live in now, it's how it's been established with the money system. But there's also ideas of quantum financial systems and even systems based on merit and how good you are to people. I mean, there's lots of. This is one dimension, guys. The Earth is one place. The people from ancient India believe that it's one place among infinite planets, infinite universes, infinite cosmos, all that stuff. And I agree with them. 100% agree with them. It's one confined system. It has its own specific cosmic laws. But that's what it is for me. And outside of that, it's there can be different rules, different systems, different ways to work things, different beings. Maybe some places have things we haven't seen. I'm sure they do. Animals we haven't seen before. Maybe there's angels in visible form in some of these worlds. And in fact, I'm sure there are, from my perspective. So yeah, it's one of those things where it pays to stay open, remain as open as possible. Obviously, we're all going to have our opinions, but specifically if it's something that if it's a scientific, say, problem, or you're trying to problem solve something, I may not have all the pieces that we need for that. It may be coming also from other people, obviously, such as Jake, which it is for sure coming from Jake, specifically with the relation to Francis Bacon and the 1611 King James Bible and the folios of Shakespeare and all these things. And again, I was saying before, it's not that I actually do. I'm interested in everything, but I have so many other things I'm working on that I don't have time to read through Shakespeare's folio. I don't have time to draw lines and to train myself to read ciphers and stuff. I'm still trying to teach astrology correctly, guys. I'm still trying to get it in front of people and to help people understand that it's a science. It's not based on your opinion or hearsay. There is a lot of intuition that's involved with it, absolutely, if you're going to do a good job. But it's mathematical. We're talking about numbers and angles. There are things that I can, at this point, do blindfolded. I don't need to reference things very often. I can do it with 5 seconds notice. I'll pull up a chart. I can go through the whole thing with the person. Someone I don't even know. I've never met them. And that's how I came actually really to do astrology, was that it was proven to me through science, the scientific method, which again, I mean, Sir Francis Bacon, thank you so much for helping us to understand that. I'm very grateful for that as well, of course. And it's something that you have when you have access to a way to interpret things clearly, you're going to come out with better answers. So for astrology, I watched Santos's video. Santos Bonacci had a video on astrology. I was actually searching for stuff about the spinal cord fluid as an esoteric medium for the spirit, conducting the spirit through the body. That's in fact often how it's described in the ancient world. And I had a lot of training in biology, I'd say like the Western Hemisphere version of biology previously. And so it's one of those things where I said, okay, I'm missing the other part of this. And of course, no one over here in North America I'd never seen anything talking about in detail about esoteric biology. That's what I call it. The chakra system, energy lines, meridians, energy meridians through the body, prana, chi, stuff like that. It's not talked about over here really that often. If it is, it's usually more like a fad or a hobby for people. It's not like a science. And I am a scientist. I want to get it as clear as possible and get it as replicatable as possible, or replicable as possible. And then when we could do that, we can establish systems, and we can try to count on the information more so than otherwise you would be doing if you weren't doing it that way. So yeah, anyway, so I watched his video about astrology. It came up in the suggestions list. I gave him a chance, and the reason I gave him a chance is because he did such a good job with the other video. That first video about the spinal cord fluid completely changed my life. I'll never be the same again. It's something that I needed when I was 18, and it wasn't available to me, and that's a big tragedy for me, because we should have access to the information that we're looking for as early as, in my opinion, as early as possible. Whenever you can interpret it and handle it, whatever the case may be. And so my channel, I'm trying to make that something for people where it's like it's not a one-stop shop, but it's kind of that idea is that come over here if you guys want to learn about the ancient world. You want to learn things in a clear way. You want to learn the ancient sciences clearly. I don't put anything extra in there. It doesn't need to be in there. It doesn't go in there. That's for keep it as simple as possible. I believe that the highest truths are actually very simple. Now, the way that people interpret that and describe that through the centuries is going to, of course, going to vary. But what you really want to do is you want to try to make systems that are cohesive and coherent, really, so that you can try to bring things together in a way that's easy to understand and not unnecessarily complicated. And actually, a lot of the times when things get really unnecessarily complicated, sometimes it's to manipulate information, which of course is endlessly irritating to me, because it is true through the years. Give me 1 second, guys. I'm trying to get something here. Yeah, and anyway, through the years, that's what happens usually with the esoteric information, is that I think people start trying to protect it, and then it ends up getting in the wrong hands. It gets manipulated, and then here we are 2,000 years after the birth of Christ, and we have lost the information, the real meanings behind it. The ancient scientists were masters at essentially everything, even better than, I would say even better handled than I have. When I do astrology, of course I'm using software, so I don't have to do calculations. If I had to do calculations, I probably wouldn't do it, because I don't have, I do the interpretation, and I know it's correct because every time I do it, it's correct. When I first did astrology, I did my own birth chart, conditions when you were born in the sky. It's where the planets and stars were at the moment you were born. And it turned out to be scarily, it was correct to a frightening extent, put it that way. Now, not that I was frightened, but it's amazingly accurate. And then I did charts for my family and friends. And it took me 2 years to get up to about, I would even say up to about even 60% accurate. It probably took me 2 years. And then after that, I developed it through the next 4 or 5 years. And of course, now I essentially can do it blindfolded. I don't need a roadmap. I have the roadmap, and I know how it works. I'm very confident with that. So anyway, that's just a little bit about a few topics, guys. Obviously, I wish Jake was here with me. Well, we're gonna follow up with that on the next show whenever Jake's available. And if you guys want to find, I'll go over this next show too. I do with Jake. But if you guys want to find, Jake has written 2 books. His most recent one is called The Oak Island Treasure Maps. And his first book is called The Holy Trinity Decryption, The Hidden Autobiography of Sir Francis Bacon. That's the one he presented in the War Room, actually, when he was on Oak Island. So those are available, I believe, on Amazon. I'll put the links to all of Jake's pages and books in the description. I'll also do that for our next show, that you guys can have that. But he's just a brilliant man. I'm so appreciative to have met him. He does great work. And I really look forward to developing whatever's next in terms of the ideas. And I think we're all hoping that a recovery is soon. That we pull something out of the ground based on ciphers and alchemy and geography and all that kind of stuff. It all has to come together. Astrology, the stars, it all has to be there. Even the esoteric biology part, I believe, has to be there. Okay, guys, so that's it for today. Thanks for joining me. It's kind of cool to be able to talk a little bit, actually, just me on camera here, and maybe I'll do this a little bit more often, especially if you guys are interested in it. Send me a message, and we can come up with topics, and I may even start doing a live show here and there, and we'll kind of go from there. All right, guys, so thanks for watching. Subscribe if you like my channel, share it with people, and let's build a better world, and let's kind of try to grow the community and keep the integrity, guys, and keep the humility. Thank you so much, guys, and we'll see you next time. Thank you.